Ours was one of the finest homes to be claimed. I didn't see how fine the fire began. It was only when I heard our neighbors shouting that I looked outside and saw the flames. Oh, we barely escaped with the clothes on our backs. Were it not for the church's generosity, I don't know what we'd do.
Come, my brothers and sisters, there is food and shelter enough for all in the Basilica. Alone's blessings to you, Father. I confess, were it not for sure we should come, there are so many unbelievable tales these days about the Archbishop, Sir Eberic, the Dravanians. Trust in your heart, brother, and pay no heed to the lies of lesser men. They seek only to lead you astray. Do you require succor as well, sir?
No. I was asking questions about arsonists. And, on behalf of the Temple Knights.
So the Temple Knights have begun their investigation at last. Good. This madness has gone on far too long. Would that I could do something to aid in your search, but I have a duty to these poor souls. Farewell, and may Fury guide your steps.
Oh. Okay. Okay. It'll be interesting to see how they handle those lies. It's also interesting that they refer to it by... Okay, so when we ran whatever dungeon it is in there, the vault. When we ran the vault, I referenced a lot about Catholicism and about the architectural significance of a Catholic church. Whether or not you're Catholic, whether or not you know anybody that's Catholic, the architecture has grown to reflect various symbolism within the traditions of the Catholic Church. And so I talked a lot about kind of like transepts and naves and all of that. So let's go talk about basilicas real quick, because he called it the basilica, which is the proper term. See if I can find an image that labels everything. Because a basilica, that matters. And so having everybody kind of hidden in there is really interesting. Basilica diagram. Come on. Somebody give me a diagram. There we go. Okay. So the fact that he called it a basilica is really interesting. Because it tells me it's outrageously Catholic. All right, this one's really clean. Not quite correct. All right. This is a good one. We're going to do this. I was hoping one would be labeled. All right. So basilica just means long, horizontal building. Like, it's the whole thing. Okay. So here is... Can I just... How do I just view this? Open image in new tab. I just want to open the image. Open image in new tab. Thank you. Perfection. All right. So within a Catholic church, let's go back over this, because the fact that he kind of referred to it as a basilica tells us that the symbolism of the church still carries. And so there's some interesting things about what he said there, where he is saying he's glad of the investigation, but then don't believe the lies you've heard. And so, like, there's going to be a lot of parallels with the early Catholic Church acting as a religious leadership body and a governmental leadership body. in the modern day, especially in places like here in the United States, religious organizations have an overtone on society, and so there is a lot about the way we make choices. Not talking politics here, just talking like historical, documented things, not how I believe or how you believe. But there are a lot of overtones in our political policies for the religious faith that is shared. And so the United States makes a lot of decisions with heavy Christian overtones as opposed to something like
I was clicking
Muslim
too fast
overtones.
and I just turned in my book for nothing.
We are not, as a country,
that is so
we do not make
heartbreaking.
atheistic decisions. So for anybody, I know many of you live outside of the U.S. and you look at us and you're like, what about this? I'm hearing church separation of church and state. It gets really muddy because the state is still made of people, and those people still have beliefs. And so those beliefs, a lot of times, especially many of them, run on platforms of I have a moral code that I live by, and if you elect me, I promise to live by that moral code. And that moral code is informed by their chosen religion, or denomination, or more specifically denomination. So within the Catholic Church, he's talking about his governmental roles right there. Farmer Girl, thank you for gifting us Abdugrada. So when we look at what he did there was he offered succor and refuge to people who have experienced loss, not as a form of religion, but as the necessity of like a governmental body that would go in and help people in case of like a natural disaster. So it's very similar to if we were in times of war, if there was a hurricane, something like that. And so that's what he offered to those people. Now, he offered it in his priestly robes, which give him both governmental authority, but also religious authority. And that's why that separation gets really muddy. And so he referred to it as a basilica, which kind of continues that on. So to kind of go over what the basilica is, because the vault is structured very, very, very differently. So we start by walking into the atrium here, okay? Now, when we walk through the atrium, there's the narthex. The narthex is your portal in time. Within the Catholic belief system, they celebrate Mass. That's the phrase. They celebrate Mass up here, up in the top half of the church. And cathedrals would have been significant structures that were built over generations. And back then, they were not built by architects. Architects as a field didn't exist until later, and kind of grew out of this. And so the original term would have been master builder. And so these would have been families of master builders, and it was passed down from fathers to sons. It was very patriarchal. And so what would have happened here is, this map looks like a cross. We can talk about, it can be a different shape, and like English ones tend to be, there's some ratios that happen. And so these structures would have been as a result of that. The goal of the structure was to push northward, vertical. So the goal was to push very vertical, and so you end up with this center column that's as tall as possible, and it makes you feel very small in the presence of God, because when you celebrate Mass, you go back in time to the original day that, you know, their Lord and Savior, the Catholic faith's Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, died, and then they actually re-experience the 3 days until it is believed that he raised from the dead, and that saves mankind. So for giant simplicity, once again, we're talking about the governmental significance and the architecture significance, not to get too far off into the religious weeds. We just can't talk about it without any knowledge of religion. You have to have some basic knowledge of how the religion functions. So this space here is a place back in time, and it is meant to take you away from what is going on in your personal life. You're meant to be here in the presence of God. And so the narthex here is where you actually go through time and space to be in here. Not in like a Stargate type way, but metaphorically you're supposed to be experiencing this feeling. And so as you walk through the narthex, and you feel it architecturally. If any of you have ever visited a Gothic church, there's some of the oldest structures in many cities, so you don't have to be a religious scholar to want to visit these. When you walk through these, there's a moment where we're at a more standard group building ceiling height, so we've got a nice 15-18 foot ceiling, something really healthy, and then we shoot up, and there's this moment where you just go, oh my god. And that's an architectural structure. That's a fixed structure that is giving you, a person, a feeling. Whether or not you believe God is a part of it, that structure was designed to encourage that. And so the narthex here is designed to do that. Now, what we would have is we have the nave. This is where most people sit, and there are columns on this side. And that can take us out to transepts, which, depending on the era and the style of church, may also have seating in it, and it may not. You can also have these very apsidials, and like those can be anywhere. And so those actually a lot of times can even be along here. It just depends on the church, because those are where you actually, people who are on pilgrimages, remember, people would have had to go see these. They would have had to see these. So they would have come from far and wide to be part of this, which means when they got there, there may have been a mass being celebrated. There may have, regardless of the time of day, that's when they arrived. And so they would come here to pay homage to a particular saint or something like that. And so these are places to pay tribute to things and kind of share in that culture, especially for a structure that is representative of a faith that is being taught to a population that, depending on the point in time you're looking at, couldn't read or write at all. And so the church has an obligation to pass both governmental teachings and religious teachings on to people who can't read and write. And so there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of things to help that kind of like oral history get passed on, and the significance get passed on when you can't do it with books. So all of that is happening here, and every aspect of this structure pays tribute to that, or pays tribute to the structure that makes it happen. To make it that tall, what ends up happening is when you put a roof on something tall, it pushes the walls out. You've got this shape, and force drives down, and it pushes it out. And because these were masonry structures, they're getting thinner and thinner and thinner as they approach the top. And so, because you don't want the heavy stones at the top. So these walls are getting thicker as we go down, which means that we need something to help push them in, like bookends. Right? Just literal bookends, just something to push them in, big, heavy masses. And that's why we end up with these what are called buttresses, which can run all right here. And so that's all just structure. There we go. Nice, healthy image. And so that's what these are. These are literally just to hold, they're just to hold that on. Because otherwise that collapses. And so when we look at the vault map. So the vault actually starts us off directly into that nave, and we progress immediately into it. And so, like, there is a question. I can open the map in the game. That's way better. Thank you. Dungeons? How do I do that? Vault. Perfect. So we immediately start off in the nave, and it is thrown in as nave. And so this whole thing is the basilica. Now, basilicas are named after who they are attributed to. And so, once again, within the Catholic teachings, the original Catholic Church, there is a phrase in biblical text that tells you that Jesus, the Lord and Savior of the Christian religion, says that their faith is their new church, their modern church. As you move into the New Testament, you transition from the Jewish faith to the Christian faith. They were going to build the church with the cornerstone, which is an architectural term, on being founded on Saint Peter, on Peter, which Peter means rock. So whether or not his name was actually Peter doesn't really matter to me, because it could just be part of that, or maybe it's just wildly coincidental. And so the church in Vatican, the Vatican Basilica here, this church here is St. Peter's Basilica. Right there. So there's something important about who we note we're going here. Now, this is a place of refuge within the Foundation. So when the Foundation is having these fires, that priest over there is saying, you need to come inside the Basilica. Where are you going to take refuge? You are going to take refuge in St. Thornton's Basilica. So when he says, don't worry about those nasty lies, that's just stability speaking. Even if there's corruption at play, it wouldn't matter, because I need you to come take refuge in St. Thornton's Basilica from these fires. There's no hiding from that. So, like, it's wildly interesting to see how they're going to respond to the population struggling with this. Because this massive structure here has Thornton's name on it. It's a massive structure to this religion that has acted as the governmental body that has protected them from literal dragons. And so all this structure, yes, there are buttresses and stuff out there. All these buttresses right here are helping hold all that up. But like that structure there, the literal pillars in actual foundation, right? We call this foundation, are holding up this entire portion of all of this. So to see this kind of get referenced, how do you handle that when your entire society is being shaken to its very core? How do you resolve that? Like, as a citizen of Ishgard, how do you handle that? I don't know. Interesting nerddom.
There was a man with a satchel. I saw him kneeling outside the window, and there was smoke everywhere. It was so hot. Oh, and I couldn't breathe. I don't remember how I made it out. I suppose I must have climbed. Maybe my arm is getting better after all.
They've lost everything. They've lost everything. I mean, look at this thing. It's monstrous. I mean, they literally make us walk upstairs, right? They put it on a literal plinth. And so a plinth is where, like, you elevate the things that are of importance to your society. So, like, we literally have to go upstairs to enter. We have to be reminded that this is above us. This is above us. It is more important. I have to climb stairs for the honor. If you want to know what's important to a society from an architectural historian standpoint, stairs is a great indicator that something was to be protected from waters. It was to be elevated above everybody else. What do we go up in the American society? What do we rise upstairs consistently to rise into? It is not uncommon to rise upstairs to enter a bank or financial institutions. It is not uncommon to have literal steps to government buildings. Government buildings. If we just type in, I live in Dallas, Texas, and without knowing for sure, I can type in the Dallas courthouse. You might recognize it if you've ever studied JFK. Right? It is risen above, it's raised above street level, ever so slightly. And that speaks to its importance. It literally elevates it. Those stairs are to remind you of that importance. You literally walk up the stairs to get inside. Right? We do it for schoolhouses. We do it for banks. We do it for malls. So anything you do it for, you are elevating that. If it's not just a literal way to resolve geography, if you are sitting on a flat site, we could have walked in at ground level. Anywhere we have to go upstairs, we are mentally storing that as above. Interesting by the fact that if you go look at so the Catholic faith has full-time staff, as it were. So here we go. Let's check this out. This is really intriguing. So we open this up in a new tab so I can make it bigger. All right, so here's your basilica, right? We've got our transepts in the middle. We've got our chapel, our choir, the lantern where mass would be held. Here's our nave. Okay, so you'd walk in through the atrium. You'd go through your transept and into your nave. Mass would be held here. The choir behind it. Right? What happens out here? This is the cloister. This is where you would have things like the crypt. This is where the nuns and monks and priests would live. Okay? They're living here, right? What that means is they're living on the same level. The same level. They are not above. Check this out. If we go look at the vault, what is above it? The cloister. The cloister. Which means your religious officials, we walk up here to celebrate our mass, to celebrate any organizations. Significant events may be held here, something like that, right? This is what people can enter. Where are the priests? Where are these people, these high houses? Where is the officials? Where do the people who run this governmental and religious organization that heads up? They're up there. They are metaphorically way above you. They are literally above you. They are substantially more important than you will ever be. These are way higher than the Pope is above the grounds at St. Peter's. The Pope's window does look down on the masses. Not like this. Not like this. That's way up there, man. That's not open to the public. People wouldn't be allowed in cloisters, but cloisters were not literally above. So, there's a lot of metaphors being drawn here in the relationship between the high houses and the priests and like the governmental and religious leaders to Ishgard. So like these people are in for a reckoning. I have no idea how they deal with this. For all of that to be shattered, I mean, you're talking Civil War levels of conflict. This is a ground up, it's a complete ground up remastering of everything. Like it shakes to their very foundation. It would not be uncommon in some cultures to tear this structure down. Or to repurpose it heavily. To repurpose it wildly. It's really hard to see any of this staying unchanged in function or in reverence. It's really hard. If there was true civil conflict, this would be the building to burn down. This is the symbol of what Ishgard's been for the past 1,000 years. I just don't even know how you look up at that and you're not constantly reminded of the lies and the deceit. So, we've talked to everybody. We've got this done. I got off in some architectural stuff. I have no idea if any part of the dev team was Catholic. We're aware of this. Some games get it really wrong. And actually, as somebody who didn't do the story, I've been very frustrated with a lot of the Catholic references. Because a lot of the Catholic references have been very, very goofy. But as I get the story, they get more correct. So the more I do story, the more things that frustrate me about kind of the architecture of this have frustrated me. You know, like when Yoshi P referenced the Greek style architecture and like the Roman style or I think it was Greek specifically, in a lot of Charlian, back at like the Mediator and stuff, I got very frustrated. Because architecture is not just about like, oh, this shape, I've seen this shape, whatever. There's a reason for it all. It all stands there. It all means something. And so you can't just be like, yeah, I just Googled Greek column. I have no idea what's going to show up here. I just Googled Greek column and like I just picked one of these. I just liked it, so I just picked it. That's not how we got here. Let's talk about these for a second. So one of the things that I was really frustrated with within Charlian was they just, like, they said Greek, they just kind of threw it out there. Remember, Greeks, Roman, and Egyptians, relative to modern day, existing, like, basically at the same time. So, these columns like this, these are the 3 core iconic column types. But you don't just pick the one you like. They mean something. So this is the, so we have our it's Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. Let's see if I can find one that just labels those. I just want those 3. The Romans kind of didn't, the Romans went a little nuts. So let's just talk Greek. So this is Doric, Ionic, Corinthian. Okay? Doric is, they not only evolved in this order, but they evolved in this order because society got fancier. So, but Doric is still used today. Doric is what you would put on something like a bank, like a government building, especially down at its foundational floor levels. These are strong, meaningful. They last the course of time. Like, from a metaphor standpoint, these are your basics. So we can go look at, like, the Roman Colosseum. Alright, because we're going to see it all present here, because they developed this really brilliantly. See if we can get a good image of it. Nice, clean image, please. Big on columns. There we go, there we go. Alright. So, down here on the floor, bottom floor, these are Doric columns around the outside. These are foundational. Doric, 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 all the way around. Doric all the way around. Next up, we have Ionic. Ionic, Doric are masculine if you speak a language that handles genders, as opposed to things being more neutral. These would be spoken of as masculine. Ionic would be spoken of as feminine. So they would be on top of this. Much more associated with things like the arts and all of that. Then we get into our Corinthian columns. These are your most decorative. These are like exotic. These are frivolous. I mean, you are just showing off. Right? And so, like, you can see it progresses in order. Doric, Ionic, Corinthian. In order. As we work our way up through the 3 Greek column types. And you don't get to just invert this. You don't get to put Corinthian on the bottom and Doric on top. That doesn't make any sense. So when I hear games say, like, yeah, we just took a lot of inspiration from Greek architecture or whatever, I get super nervous at, like, all these things that came from symbolism that was intentionally representative. So I get super nervous that, like, they're going to go just make something up and they're not going to understand that everything had a logical trajectory, right? The buttresses were designed to hold the outside up. And so buttresses that just, maybe that's an aqueduct, but a lot of times these buttresses are just buttresses. To nothing. To nothing. That should be attached up here to stop this from collapsing. So I get really nervous that they're going to get stuff wrong, and it would be better to just create your own architectural language. I'm willing to admit that, like, fantastical places have fantastical materials or whatever, and can be, like, taller than any Gothic thing could be. That's fine. But a lot of this stuff comes out of respect for culture and respect for materials. A lot of these shapes come from making an art style out of something that needed to exist. So, there's a lot of weirdness that starts to exist within this that doesn't always make a whole lot of sense. But there's a fair bit of symbolism within Heavensward that actually is adding up more the further into Heavensward I get. Which is exciting. It is. It's exciting. Alright. You say I'm not getting through 3.2 today? Oh, we're getting through 3.2 today. Am I not making progress?